Most people who climb on the roof at Buckingham Palace get arrested, or they climb through the window and go in the Queen's bedroom and get arrested. My guest today actually had the honour of being invited onto the roof at Buckingham Palace and getting away with it. Brian May. Welcome, Brian.
Took me by surprise there.
Well, there must have been you haven't done anything like that in your life, have you? That must have
No,
been...
and never will again, I'll tell you. But I enjoyed it. It was amazing.
Who asked you?
The committee who were organising the party for the Queen.
Was it 2002, wasn't it? Was it two,
Yes, I think it was. Was it
Jubilee,
2
yeah.
or 3? Yeah. And they actually asked me to. They said we were thinking you might play the national anthem a bit like Jimi Hendrix strolling through the staterooms of Buckingham Palace, and I went, I think that's going to work really. And I went down there to see them, and I said, you know what would work to make this something epic and something people would remember? I said, I should be up there. I should be the lone piper up on one of your battlements. And they sort of went into a huddle, and I expected them to say, nah, no, forget it. And they went, OK, that'll be fine. And then then my heart kind of jumped because I thought, OK, I've got to do this now. And it's not an easy thing to take on, obviously.
No, I mean, to some respects, you're up for a hiding for nothing if it goes wrong, aren't you, really?
Yeah, there's a lot to lose. You would look the biggest idiot in the world if you messed up God Save the Queen live. And it had to be live, that's the thing.
Yeah.
I mean, I could not be the person who woke up next morning and had mimed on top of Buckingham Palace. You know? So it's very risky. And the risk isn't that you fall off. The risk is that you make such an idiot of yourself that you'd want to fall off. So it was an exercise in facing fear, I have to tell you, because in the months, I think a couple of months leading up to that, I would drive past Buckingham Palace and get this real thrill of fear in my belly, just looking at the place and thinking, Jesus, I've actually got to do this, you know, live in front of 1 billion people, whatever. But great.
How did you rehearse something like that? Did you go up on the roof to rehearse? Or
we did eventually, yeah, we did a rehearsal up there. It was very funny. It's funny because we kind of couldn't find a way. It was a Spinal Tap moment. They said, oh, yes, come this way, you know, get in this lift, and up we go. So we go in the lift up to the roof level, and he goes, OK, oh, actually, this isn't going to work. So we went down again, and the door wouldn't open, and then we trudged around different places and found a staircase, and eventually we found a way up onto the roof. It was a real... I actually should write a little book about it, because it was such a memorable experience all around. And the feeling when it was actually done, I was like, yes, thank you, God. Because in the end, you have to... I mean, I'm not really a religious person.
No.
As you would say, you know, conventionally religious. But you get to the point where you've done all your preparation and you've rehearsed and whatever, and you've tried to cover every eventuality. You know, it could rain, the strings could go out of tune, the amp could go wrong.
Yeah.
And eventually you think, OK, there is only so much I can do, and the rest is in the lap of the gods. It's in your higher power, you know, and you've probably experienced this as well. But, you know, so I actually had to do this thing. I was freaking, and, well, my wife was very good. Anita was very good. She said, rehearse. Now, rehearsal is something fairly unfamiliar to me.
Yeah.
I don't need to. So I did, I rehearsed. But I came to that point where I thought, OK, it could still go tits up very easily.
Did you have any contingency plans, like another amp standing by? Was there a crew tech lying on the floor ready to shove anything?
Well, my tech was up there with me, and he was actually the first person to play guitar on top of Buckingham Palace roof, Pete Malandro.
Oh, right.
Because he had to try it out, you know.
Oh, right.
No, but I had this huge rig on one side. It was amazing with my 3 AC30s. And on the other side, I had a huge monitor from the orchestra who were about 500 yards away. So if I could have heard them, it would have been a disaster.
Yeah.
You know, and I just stood between them, and it was an amazing sound once we actually got it together. It was huge.
I can understand, because, I mean, how many 100 million people were watching?
Quite a lot, I think.
Yeah. So it's not...
It's a one-off experience. Anything that, you know, anything that's one-off is quite sort of demanding anyway.
Yeah.
If you're on a tour, you sort of take it for granted. You go and go quite jolly on stage every night.
I'll get that right tomorrow.
Yeah, that's right. Oh, that's all right. And but if it's a one-off and everything depends on it, you get very keyed up, and you've got to...
Did this committee that were put together, did they have to get permission from the Queen to do it? Were things run by the Queen?
I don't think they actually asked her every detail, no. I think she'd given the responsibility to some people to put this together.
Had you met her before?
Had I met her? No, I don't think I had met her at that point. No, I met her afterwards.
What did she say?
I didn't meet her on the day. I met...
Oh, right. So you didn't see her on the actual event?
No, I think she'd. I don't think she actually saw me do the thing. I think she was probably doing her hair at the time, and it was probably rather inconvenient for her. But
I say, Philip, what's that?
Yeah, it was quite funny actually, because I met her at one of. I was being presented to the Queen as it was sort of Musicians' Day or something, and I was there with it was a very auspicious occasion with Clapton and Jeff Beck. And Jimmy Page, who were all heroes of mine. So I was feeling very, why am I here kind of thing, you know. And she came on and I said, I was the guy who disturbed you that day by playing on your roof. And she went, oh, was it you? So, you know, I don't think it was a big day in her life, let's put it that way. But it was a big day in my life.
It was a big day in rock and roll life.
I kind of felt that I was a symbol. I did feel that. I felt like I had the responsibility, you know, without wishing to be sort of pretentious about it. I thought, well, in a way, I'm up there to celebrate 50 years of her reign, but also 50 years which happened to be the life of rock and roll as we know it. And so you probably know I had this tunic made with all what I thought were some of the most significant songs of rock over the years. And I said, you know, to the costume designer, I said, I want to look like I've been standing up there for 50 years in rain and shine, and it was all kind of distressed and battered. I don't know if you saw.
Yeah, I did. Yeah.
With a sort of very, very faded Union Jack in the lining. And it was a lot of fun. I felt like I was sort of, in a sense, not exactly an actor, but a symbol, you know, a symbol there.
It's interesting because one of the guys in my band said to me it was the day that, he said, that's the day that rock and roll was accepted. And I think there's an element of truth in that.
Interesting, yeah. It did. Threads did come together, didn't they?
But isn't it interesting how, you know, how, I hate using the term, as we get older, how the path that we all set on with our rock music, with our music, goes off at all the different angles. I mean, we will rock you. I mean, when did Ben speak to you about that before it all started?
Well, it's our sort of joint baby, really.
Was it your idea or his idea?
I don't know whose idea it was to do it. It's probably Jim Beach, our manager's idea, really. Because he was saying, even in 1986, when we were playing our last shows with Freddie, I remember having a conversation with Jim, with Freddie, and Jim was saying, well, of course we'll do the musical. And we went, oh, Jim, we're not doing a musical. We don't like musicals, you know, forget it, you know. But it was talked about even at that time, and Jim kept bringing it up, bless him. He had it as kind of his dream. And he sort of persuaded us that we could make a musical without compromising and without becoming what we hated, if you know what I mean. And but we had various attempts at it. We tried doing a sort of biographical thing about Queen. That was the first. Obviously, it's the first thing that comes up. And
was this on your own, or had Ben Elton become involved?
No, Ben wasn't involved in those.
Right.
Days,
Okay.
no.
So this was just you as the band, as the guy.
Yeah, me and Roger and Jim really, because John's not very interested in pursuing these things these days, which is his own. Yeah. Which is fine. No, and we
was
found
Freddie still around at the time?
No,
Freddie's
gone.
Freddie gone by then. Okay.
Yeah. But we hired a writer to have a go at it, and we actually got as far as a workshop. We did a workshop in New York, and we just didn't like it. We didn't feel comfortable about seeing us portrayed and Freddie portrayed, and we just thought, no, this isn't nice. And so we abandoned the idea, actually, of the musical as well. You know, we thought, no, it's not going to work. Let's not do it. And then nobody knows how this happened, but we found ourselves in a room with Ben Elton and discussing this thing. And he says that we asked him, and we say that he asked us. But actually, we formulated a plan whereby we would try and put a musical on which would not be biographical. It would be something else, and we didn't know what it was. And then, cutting a long story short, a few months later, Ben came up and said, I have it, I've got it. I was walking in the park with my kids, I've got the idea. You know, it's not about the past, it's about the future, it's about kids in the future, and it's about not being able to play rock and roll, not having freedom. And we went, oh, okay, that sounds good. And he'd written it. I mean, Ben's like that. He's a workaholic, like you and me, probably.
Yeah.
But he'll go away and do it, and there it was. And he'd even sort of placed most of the songs in there.
Really?
It was all sort of sketched out. And we went, oh, great. And it made us laugh. And it had a point to it. And it's got quite a serious point about the way things are going in sort of global homogenisation and loss of freedoms and stuff. And so we developed it together. We did a workshop, and I'm immensely proud of it. To me, it is a baby. Right. It is sort of our baby, and we keep very close to it.
It's passed every test too, hasn't it?
It has. It's coming into, it'll be 7 years very soon, and it's packed, it's red hot still, which is really, in these days especially, an amazing thing. I think it's because people come out happy. No matter how they go in, they come out going, yeah, great, I'll bring my friends, you know. It's got that sort of feeling about it. You know, you escape from reality for a while.
I mean, I remember first being told about it. I read about it, or was told about it. And I went, oh, that'd be great. Yeah, Queen music, because I mean, so many great songs there, that'd be great. And who's involved? Ben Elton, you know, because it was, I mean, I'm a huge Ben Elton fan. I love his writing. I think he's absolutely hysterical. But to somebody on the outside, you think, what a strange combination.
Yeah.
But it's worked so brilliant, isn't it?
Yeah, I was a fan of Ben Elton, but I was a bit scared of him, to be honest, because he was very abrasive in his younger days.
Quite loud, isn't he?
Yeah, and I thought, oh, he probably hates us, you know. But I met him on a coach one day going to a Bad News concert, and he turned out to be a nice bloke.
Yeah.
And don't ever play Trivial Pursuit with him or anything to do with musical knowledge, because he knows everything about music, everything.
Really?
About every group, every guitarist, every singer, from dot. Yeah, he's amazing. He's encyclopedic about music, and he's a big fan of ours. I didn't realise.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of Ben, actually, and he's very unfashionable. It's amazing how things become unfashionable, and a lot of these sort of young comedians seem to think it's cool to slag Ben Elton off, which I find strange, really, because I think most of them owe something to him. You know?
I think one of the things where Ben's been shown real talent, he was not only very unique as a stand-up, which a lot of people still copy his style, a lot of the young guys.
I think they do,
what a phenomenal scriptwriter in not just one facet, but in different facets. I mean, you couldn't get more different from, say, like Blackadder to Thin Blue Line, for example.
Yes,
I mean, they're two totally different forms of comedy. Plus his writing as well, you know, his book writing. And then to suddenly, you know, he said, and he's also been hugely successful working with Queen on We Will Rock. I mean,
we didn't let him direct it at first. We thought, oh, no, it's not good for the writer to be the director. So we got someone else to direct it, which was nearly a disaster. I mean, it actually was a disaster, but we managed to sort of rescue things at the last moment. And Ben stepped in at our behest as director. And that's another talent we found. He's the most amazing director. He's just... Really? Anyone comes into the room and he will start giving to them. He'll say, will you try this? And he'll do little things with them, you know, when we're auditioning, which we do every year for the London production, and we have other productions too. Everybody comes in and nobody's mistreated. Nobody, you know, Ben runs it. We're there, you know, we contribute, but it's Ben's kind of show, you know. And he'll just work with them as if they were already in the production and find things in them and make them laugh and put them at ease. And it's the very opposite of the kind of X Factor kind of thing where people get humiliated, you know. So we take a great pride in running great auditions and trying to look after our people once we've taken them on.
Do you remember opening night?
Oh, yeah. Opening night was kind of wonderful and terrible because it looks like it's all in pieces. You can see all the flaws, you know, because everything's very new. And I was hooping and hollering and making a noise, you know. And it seemed to go very well. And, of course, we got destroyed in the press the next day. I couldn't believe what it was like. That's really hard to wake up. And it was very hard for the cast to wake up and see that.
Yeah.
But the funny thing is, it kind of made us stronger because we met and we discussed and we formed a plan of how we were going to survive through this, what was obviously going to be a difficult period, because after the reviews, the bookings went down. I mean, it's the most amazing thing. You have a first night and you think that's going to launch it to the world. And the bookings actually were less that day than they'd been the day before because people believed what those bastards in the press said. And it did make us strong. We worked on it and we worked on the sort of image and the publicity. And we got two great breaks. The breaks were dear old Michael Parkinson, who went on his show so people could actually see what we did, what the cast did, and the fact that they could actually perform Bohemian Rhapsody and make it work with the band and everything. And then we did the Party in the Park thing, at which I played on the roof. But the great thing was that Tony Vincent went forward and did We Are the Champions, and people thought, oh, actually, it does work, you know.
There was an awful lot of word of mouth that went round.
Yeah, and
I can remember those reviews coming out, and I thought, I mean, like you, I'm not a great fan of reviewers, especially theatre and musical critics, because I just think half the time they're more up their own backside than anything else.
Yeah, and their mate's backside. Yeah,
And-
it's a whole.
and all-
Let's not go there.
I know, but also it's no longer do people review shows; they do their opinion, and that's the thing that's really. But what was quite interesting. In about the next 2 weeks that followed, I kept meeting people who'd been. I hadn't been at that time. I was a year for I went. I hadn't been at that time. And they kept and they said, "Oh, we went to see We Were Rocking." I said, "What do you think?" They said, "It's fantastic."
Great.
And I thought, this is interesting because at the end of the day, it is the public who say.
It is.
You know?
And in the end, that's the only thing.
And I'm sure I've always been convinced that there was a considerable amount of word of mouth.
Yeah. Oh, that's what's kept us on there totally.
Yeah. How many years is it now?
7. It'll be 7 very shortly. Yeah, it's great. I love it. I really do. And I go a lot, and we still contribute. And Ben, bless him, endlessly works on it, and he'll bring the script up to date, because the script is very much what's happening sort of in rock and roll history, and he'll change things, and the characters will change just to keep it fresh and keep it amusing, which it is, I think.
How many other countries is it in now, do you know?
We've been in about 12 countries, but at the moment I think we have about 4, because they come and go sort of seasonally. So we've been in Australia and Japan. Japan comes back every Christmas. We've just opened in Stuttgart, which is doing fantastically well, and we have one in Toronto. And we're working on one for France. Spanish one comes and goes. I love the Spanish one because the songs sound great in Spanish. So I've done some work on that, translating. But the hot news is that we have a tour now in the UK, which will start off in March.
Oh,
and we're very excited. We've just auditioned. We have a brand new cast for it, brand new band. They're all great, fantastic musicians. And they're in rehearsal right now as I speak. So it's very, very exciting. A new baby, new cast full of energy, and it's.
What's it feel like when you hear guitarists playing like you?
I like it. I mean, it's very educational for me, because when you hear somebody else play your licks, you begin to understand what works and what doesn't, and perhaps why people like what you do or not. And I find it very interesting. I've always been one-to-one with all our players, and they're all great players in their own right. I mean, in London we have Laurie Wisefield, who's from Wishbone Ashes,
Yeah.
Alan Darby from all sorts of places, from Floyd to Clapton to whatever,
Yeah.
Both amazing players in their own right. So obviously I start off with huge respect, and my first words were, "You sure you don't mind playing my stuff?" And they were like, "No, that's great." But they play it in their own way. That's the thing. That's the thing about We Will Rock You. It doesn't force a style on anybody.
No.
We try to encourage people's sort of natural styles and abilities, whether they're actors or musicians or whatever, in the spirit of what the piece is. I mean, the piece is about freedom. Now, obviously, there has to be some discipline. There has to be a script. There has to be, they're Queen songs. They've got to sound like Queen songs. But those guys play things, they'll play kind of my riffs, but they'll play it in their own way, and they put their own personality on, which makes it great.
Yeah, but your style and your riffs are very much the Queen sound. It must be fun to play, because otherwise the guys wouldn't play 'em, which is a compliment to you, isn't it? Really?
Yeah, I get great feedback from them. I love it. And everybody says that it's good fun to do and it's stimulating, and they're still there. I mean, those guys are still there after 7 years. I can't believe it. Neil Murray's on bass, who's an old, playmate of mine.
Yeah.
Used to play with Cozy and everything. He's still there. He's a giant of bass playing, is Neil. And he's still in the Dominion, not every night, because he goes off and does other things, but he holds that chair for eternity, if he wants it.
Had you realised before We Will Rock You came out, had it really occurred to you how many fantastic songs, and I hate using the word hits, but songs and hits that yourself and Queen have been responsible for, of which you'd written most of them, if not nearly all of them?
Well, no, I haven't written most of them, really. No,
well, a lot.
Fred wrote an awful lot of them.
Yeah.
Actually, I know Ben told us, and we hadn't realised it, we're the only group in the world who have all written #1 hits. I didn't know that, actually. Because John wrote another one, Bites the Dust, You're My Best Friend, and Break Free. Freddie wrote lots of stuff, from Rhapsody to Killer Queen to Champions, whatever. Roger wrote Gaga and These Are the Days of Our Lives, very significant big hits. And I wrote a couple of bits and pieces. So we all were in there. You know, and
You are Mr. Modest at times, I tell you.
No, I'm not modest really. I'm very proud of what we've done. I am. You know, I go in there and I feel immense pride, and I get quite emotionally carried away sometimes at the end of almost always at the end of the show. I go to We'll Rock You, and sometimes I'm busy doing stuff, and I have business to do in there, whatever, you know. But I go in there, make sure I'm in there for the end, and the audience always get up, and they always clap, and they always sing, and they always, you know, give the guys a standing ovation. And I just think I wish Fred was here to see this, because he would just love it.
He probably is in his own way.
I sort of feel that he is. I feel Freddie's very much a part of what we do, and yeah, I feel like he's.
He is. I mean, Fred is somebody. I only got to meet Fred a few times out in Montreux.
Yeah.
And got on great with him. An absolute character of all sorts. I mean, just a real and another cat lover.
Oh, loved his cats. He had 7 cats.
Yeah.
At the end, yeah.
I know he had lots of cats from and yourself. Something about musicians and cats. But the you know, the interesting thing was about the songwriting that you mentioned. You all wrote great songs. Did you come with a finished song to the band? Did you somebody come along and say, or did Fred, or did yourself, or Roger? Well, did you come with a finished song and say, here's a song, and then everybody sort of do a bit of an arrangement around it, or were things pulled to pieces when they came?
All of the above, really. I think really.
Oh, mixture, was it?
Yeah, I'd say there wasn't a formula, which I think is quite good.
Right.
Normally, one of us would bring something in fairly developed as an idea, and sort of put it on the table, but it would get ripped to shreds. People say, no, you can't do that, you've got to do this, you know, and let's try, which is good. So you kind of throw it to the lions. And then there was a kind of unwritten law that after this process had happened, that the original writer would have the final say on what went on there. So it was, I suppose, sort of disciplined process. But it would start in many ways. Sometimes we just went in and jammed and played together, and something came out of that. So it was hard to say who wrote it, and that happened more and more towards the end, which was nice, really. But the songs would come in various forms. Sometimes, you know, somebody would just be strumming a guitar and say, do you want to try this? And sometimes, you know, particularly Roger would come in with a whole highly developed backing track and overdubs and vocal and everything.
Did you, was anybody particularly precious about their stuff?
I think we were all precious, actually. I think that's where the fights come, you know, because you get very possessive about your baby, don't you?
Yeah.
You can't help it. Yes, I think there was there was certainly a lot more tension and grief in the studio than there ever was on the road. On the road, doing concerts, it's clear. What you do is you go on and you try and make people happy for 2.5 hours or whatever, and everybody has the same sort of end in view. In the studio, there's this kind of struggle to be heard and to sort of mould things into what you have in your head. I don't know if you find the same thing.
Yeah,
but
very similar.
But it's hard to, you know, when there's 4 people trying to paint that picture, it's tough, really, to get an agreement as to how things come out.
How did you stick to your guns? I mean, I always had a great admiration for everything you did. You mentioned Bohemian Rhapsody earlier. You say Freddie brought that in initially as well.
Yeah, oh yeah.
Now that broke a lot of rules, if you know what I mean. I mean, not a lot of rules. I would say the rules, shall we say, music, because of course in theory, we can all do what we like. But the rules at the time on things like radio play, which were crucial to everything.
Yeah, that's right.
I mean, Bohemian Rhapsody broke every single rule.
Yeah.
And yet it became, it broke the rules in radio too, because it became the most played radio track.
Yeah, amazing.
And yet it didn't fit into any of the genre that it should have done. So were you, at the time, I'm intrigued to know, when you were doing Bohemian Rhapsody, did Jim Beach or anybody around you sort of say, I tell you what, guys, we might have to really edit this down or do something, otherwise we're not going to get play?
Exactly. That's exactly what
did happen, did it?
Yeah, it wasn't Jim Beach in those days. This is Jim Beach was our lawyer in those days.
Yeah, he was originally a lawyer, that's right.
Yeah, and he was sort of in the picture. But actually, it was John Reid who was our manager,
and
fairly new manager at the time, because we'd just been at the brink of disaster. And we went to John and said, "Can you help?" And he sort of went, "Okay." I'll try and do the negotiations. You go away and make the best album you've ever made. That's how we went into Night at the Opera, because it was make or break. We were so far in debt before that, and all sorts of problems. So it was John Reid who was Elton's manager at that time, obviously. And yes, John would come in now and again, and we didn't know what the single was going to be because we never did. It was always like, let's just make the album and then it'll come out. It's going to be obvious what the single is at some point. And we were heading towards Bohemian Rhapsody, and John came in and said, "Oh, it's very long, you know. I don't know if this will work." He said, "Can I play it to EMI?" And we went, "Yeah, all right, yeah," because we didn't like the record company being involved really, because we like to make our own music and then anyway.
That's not easy to do.
No,
you get some A&R man doesn't know a hatchet from a crotchet, and you're in trouble.
Yeah, and it took a long time to get that autonomy, so we just got it by being pig-headed and precocious boys really, because normally we didn't let them in. Anyway, we said, yeah, you can play it to the record company. And so he took it away and he said, look, he came back and said, EMI say, look, you can't possibly put this out as a single, it's much too long, and they'd like to do an edit, you know, and they've actually suggested an edit, and we went, no, we don't want to do that because it destroys the song. This is something so unusual and precious, and it has to have all its angles in there to make sense. Yeah. So we said, would you mind going back and telling them that we don't want to do that? And John Reid, to give him his credit, said, absolutely, that's what I'll do. And he said, fuck them if they don't want to take it. And he went back in and said, no, the boys want to do this, and I'm behind them, and that's what you're getting for your single. And to give EMI credit, they went, OK. And it went out. Kenny Everett's part of this story, as you probably know, because he stole a copy when we did our little private screening or whatever it was. And I woke up the next day when I was still working on the album. You know, when you wake up when things are going around in your head and you're horribly sort of nightmare situation where you're still worrying about how you're going to mix this particular bit. I woke up and my neighbour's radio was playing Bohemian Rhapsody, because Kenny Everett had it on his show. Not once, but twice, I think, all the way through. And so that broke the ice. And Kenny kind of claimed credit for discovering this particular gem, which is great. You know, he did, really.
I mean, the lovely thing about that time, there was still wasn't much. There was a little bit of freedom with, shall we say, more of the anarchists at the BBC, like Kenny, because Kenny would be told to do it and he'd go, no, I'll do what I'm... There was an element of him doing what he wanted to do.
Definitely. I think it'd be very hard for people to do that now, wouldn't it? Most disc jockeys don't...
Oh, yeah. They can't do it. They can't do it now. I mean, it's very interesting that if the clock had been moved forward and you did Bohemian Rhapsody now and wanted to put it out as a single, I wonder whether you would...
I think it'd be very hard.
Yeah.
I think you might not.
So it suddenly starts to become, sell like unbelievable hotcakes.
Yeah.
I mean, it was just
amazing.
It was one of those records that everywhere you went, because it was so different and because it broke all the rules, it just seemed that everybody played it everywhere you went. So what did EMI say then?
Oh, they just smiled.
And so we knew all along. We knew all along.
No, they were good. They stood by us. I mean, I say we've always had a good relationship with EMI, contrary to a lot of people who sort of hate their record companies and stuff.
Yeah. But were you with EMI? You mentioned you're on the brink of disaster.
Yeah.
You know, before and after the opera.
Well, we weren't signed directly to EMI, and that was part of the disaster, really. We were signed to an intermediate production company who then licensed our product to EMI. So we had this kind of middleman, and the middleman was sucking the blood out of us and not passing on what was coming back from EMI. So
how did you end up getting signed to a production company?
By default, really, because we took round the tapes, our first demo tapes. I'll try and make this short.
No, don't. This is fascinating.
No, we made 4 tracks in a friend... You know, you're looking for your first break, and it's impossible to... You think, well, everybody else makes records, everybody else does gigs. How do you get into that? Because you talk to these people who run the Marquee Club or whatever, and they don't want to book you unless you've got a record. You go to some record company, and they don't want to make a record unless you've got bookings. You know, so where do you start? So we were really completely in the cold. And the only person we knew was a young guy called Terry, who worked as an assistant in a recording studio, a old girlfriend of mine. And he said, look, you guys can come in and help us do our sound insulation tests in the new Delane Lee studio, as it was then, Wembley. And in return, we'll make you some demos. So that's how. So we had these 4 tracks which we made, and we took them around to all the record companies.
And that was the lineup we all know and love, was it?
Yeah, yeah. It's me and Freddie and Roger and John.
Yeah.
And a couple of songs which ended up on the first album. and nobody wanted it. Nobody. Everybody said, yeah, it's all right, but go away and develop it. You know, go and write some more songs and come back to us when you've done some gigs. And nobody. The only people who wanted to take us on were people called Trident, who were connected with Trident Studios in Wardour Street.
Yeah.
And the reason that happened was because of another friend called John Anthony, who had always said that he would kind of like to produce us, but he didn't have the wherewithal. So I think John was employed by them at the time, and he said, look, you should take them on as a production deal, and I'll produce them. So that's how we sort of got our break. But unfortunately, I mean, I don't want to slag them off.
No.
They've been slagged off enough. They know who they are. But, I mean, Freddie wrote Death on Two Legs sometimes. And I'm not going to say it was about them. But, you know, it's an interesting comparison.
Yeah, read into it what you like.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And, you know, with such words as, was the fin on your back part of the deal? You know, so it was a sort of a very sharky situation, and we had to get out because we were just in a bad situation. I remember Freddie saying that he wanted a piano to write songs on, and they said, yeah, well, we'll rent you a piano because if we give you the money, you'll spend it on something else. And you know, like Roger would be told he shouldn't break sticks because it would, you know, and it was too much of an expense or whatever. You know, so we were just not in a good situation, even though we'd had a couple of hits.
Yeah.
You know, we'd had, well, small hits. 70s Arrive was a small hit, and then Killer Queen was
a big hit.
Fair hit.
And you were playing live at this time as well?
Yeah, yeah. We'd been out with Mott the Hoople at that time, which was great. That was a real... takes me back.
So in theory, I mean, this has happened so many times with people I've spoken to here. In theory, you've had a couple of hits, you know, one serious hit, if you want. You're out playing, doing gigs. You've got you shouldn't have been in the financial mire, really, should you?
No, we shouldn't. No.
But once it takes hold, it's bloody hard to get rid of it.
Yeah, it definitely wouldn't have been. Definitely would have been the end, actually, if Bohemian Rhapsody hadn't done what it did and The Night at the Opera hadn't done what it did. I think.
Was there sort of a band meeting where somebody called a band meeting, yourself or Fred or Roger or John, and you sat around and said, "This can't go on. We've got to do something."
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, and
because people are fascinated with band meetings, and they do really happen, don't they?
Oh, totally. Yeah, yeah. And it was very difficult. Oh, there's a lot more to this story. I mean, maybe we'll write the book one day.
Yeah.
But a lot of people were involved because we went to various managers who we admired and respected at the time to get advice, and also to say, "Don't suppose you'd like to take us on, would you?" You know, Peter Grant was one. Peter was fantastic.
Yeah.
Took us down to his Muse house and sat around there and said, "Yeah, we could do this, you know, and I could do this and this and this." And suddenly we had kind of an offer on the table from Peter Grant, who's
Zeppelin and all
the manager of managers of Zeppelin,
Yeah.
you know. And he was fantastic. He was really great. And he said, "Look, no pressure. You know, you can go with who you like. That's just my advice." So I mean, what a brilliant
I love
guy,
Peter.
you know.
I love
he
him
was
to death.
wonderful.
Yeah.
And we went to John Reid as well. We went to a couple of other guys. And the problem was that we got a bit fragmented because Freddie got very keen on one particular person, and I got very keen on another person. And it became quite difficult, and there was a lot of pressure. And some of the managers weren't so kind of open in their dealings, you know. Some of them, you know, some people will give you advice, but there's a hook in the advice, you know.
Yeah.
So we got into all sorts of strange negotiations, and in the end, the only person we could agree on that we all liked and we all trusted was John Reid.
John Reid, yeah.
Yeah. He turned out to be a very ebullient character, and he still is, you know, bless him.
Yeah.
And he just gave us he was the right man at the right time, there's no question. He had a very high level sort of quality operation, and was able to just take care of business while we made the records. So it worked very well for a while. It didn't work so well after a while because things change, you know, things always change, you know. And one of the reasons it didn't work so well after a while is because Elton got upset because we were taking up too much of John's time, you know. So the seeds were sown of dissent, and it was difficult times. You know.
In fairness, but
great times.
If you'd have ended up with Peter Grant, that might have been a similar situation with Queen and Zeppelin. Might well have.
Yes, I think it would. And to be honest, I think that's why we all loved Peter, you know, and we thought what are we doing? Are we saying no to Peter Grant? But we felt, because we would have been on Swan Song, which was kind of already a baby of Zeppelin, we would be kind of second fiddle, and being precocious boys, we wanted to be
yeah,
at the top
mixed
level.
precociousness and also knowing that you've got something special at the same time.
Yeah, we wanted to be special.
Yeah.
Yeah. And interesting, because Peter Grant had the opposite advice at that time. John Reed's advice was, go in the studio, make the record of your career, and I will sort things out. Peter Grant's advice was, go on the road, and I will sort things out, because you're not ready to make the record. And it would have been... It's very interesting to figure out what would have happened if we'd gone the other route with Peter. I think we would have gone out on the road, probably for a long time, and it would have been a very different record that we made when we came back, probably.
Were you always someone, just as both as an individual and as a band, who wanted to break rules?
Yeah, I think so.
You said about doing it. I mean, I always remember the first time I saw you play. This was and I suppose the best way to describe it is there was a lot of uniformity that was around, even in rock music at that time. That basically the bass players had a Fender Jazz bass. The guitarist had at least 4 Marshall stacks. The things at the back.
Yeah,
and,
that's right.
And the two people at the time I saw back then, just before I joined Yes for Now, I saw that Steve had a Fender Twin out there, and I thought, he's got a what? And then I go to you, and there up there's the old Vox AC30s. Yeah. And that immediately made me go, I'm going to like this, because here's somebody
Really?
Now, was that a deliberate thing to be different from everybody, or just because those are the sounds you wanted to make, or?
The latter, really. Yeah, we didn't want to be different for the sake of it, although we were aware. But really, it was searching for your own ways of expression, and the AC30s for me were just the fulfilment of something which was in my head.
Yeah.
I always remember there was an interview with Eric Clapton saying that he sort of tried lots of things, and when he plugged into this particular thing, he said, that is my sound, that's my voice. That's how I felt about the AC30s. It's different, you know, I came to a different place. But I came to it because of Rory Gallagher. Rory Gallagher was really my sort of benchmark hero, I suppose, in a way, you know. We used to go and see Rory pretty much every week at the Marquee Club.
Yeah.
Taste, his band was Taste. Magnificent band they were, I thought, you know, and we admired the fact that they were so interlocked as a band, they could go off on tangents and come back and always stay together. And also the fact that they entertained, because entertainment, like you said, you described what groups were like in those days. Yeah. Really, a lot of groups in those days would go on stage and have their back to the audience a lot of the time, get into their vibe, man, and it would be very progressive, and you'd kind of ignore the audience. But Rory Gallagher was there, and he was open to the room, and he would talk to people, and he'd say, oh, I'm going to do this now, tell you a little story, you know, and all this kind of stuff. And we just loved how Rory would interact with his audience and then go, okay, you know, and into it, you know, and the sound, and forgive me if I go on too much.
No,
about
not
Rory,
at all.
But
No,
to me, he was the ultimate gentleman as well of rock and roll, because we went back and we were only kids really, and why would he bother? But we sort of hung around and hid in the Marquee while they were chucking everybody out, and managed to sort of engage him in conversation after one of his gigs, and he was just delighted. We were asking him questions, you know, I'm saying, you know, how do you get your sound? What do you do? And he was, oh, you know, Brian, it's very easy. I just do this. I have this little box here, you know, a little treble booster, AC30. I have this old baby here, you know, and he just described everything. And that's how I came towards the AC30, because Rory said, there's nothing like this. He said, this is sweet. He said, you know, this is not a big, loud machine noise. This is sweet, you know, and it will sing for you, you know. So I went straight out and in Wardour Street someplace, bought a couple of very battered second-hand AC30s. And in the shop, I'd got hold of one of his little boosters, Rangemaster treble booster, took my guitar along, a combination of my guitar and this little booster, and the Vox AC30 was magic. It was instantly, that's what I wanted. It was the sound, it had that sort of throat like a voice, it had the sustain, it had the sweetness, and it would not be so distorted that chords would sound like crap. You know, you'd still hear the chords. So that was me, and I've never wavered from that. That's the perfect
Did you ever
sound.
get to tell him?
Yeah, I did, yeah, thank God. Yeah, I saw Rory a lot, and I saw it after we were stars as well, you know. And
did you say to him, I was that spotty kid who came in.
Yeah, and it was such an example to me because, you know, you get busy and stuff and tired and whatever, and I try never to sort of be offhand with people. I try to be like he was and have time for people, you know, because that little kid that you're talking to is going to be the next Jimi Hendrix, you know.
What did he say?
He was just delightful. He was, oh, Brian, it's nothing, you know, I'm just a guitarist. And Rory never kind of sought fame, you know, he was...
No.
In fact, he almost sort of sidestepped it, I suppose, you know. He just loved his music and he loved his audience, and that's what it was all about. So he's a great example in many ways, I think.
Queen wasn't your first band, was it?
No. No. We had various sort of attempts in school to make bands, one of which was called the Mind Boggles, I seem to remember. It's very dim in my memory now, maybe deliberately.
Well, I'm sure we can just turn the light up a little bit. So how old were you then?
14, 15.
And you've been playing for a bit?
Yeah, I've been playing since I was 7. I got a guitar for my 7th birthday.
Out of the blue, or did you ask for
No,
one?
I asked, yeah, because I'd seen the Tommy Steele story and I'd heard the Crickets. I saw the Crickets, Buddy Holly and the Crickets on Sunday night at the London Palladium, and was just gobsmacked beyond anything, you know. That was it for me. I wanted to do that. Buddy Holly's still that for me, you know.
Yeah.
He's still...
So what was the first guitar, acoustic or an electric?
acoustic.
Yeah.
And it seemed very... I remember waking up on my 7th birthday and this huge thing was on my bed. It's very magical, you know, my parents had put it in there. And of course it's not huge, it's only quite a small guitar, but to me it was huge. And I put my fingers around it, I couldn't really get the fingers around because I'd been playing a little tiny ukulele banjo, sort of George Formby style, which my dad taught me, so I knew what chords were. And I tried to make the chords work on this 6-string monster.
So you got 2 more strings than the ukulele.
Yeah, what do these strings do? You know, so I kind of put my thumb over those strings because it seemed to make it sound better, and sort of evolved my own way of making chords. And it turns out that that's what a lot of other people did. That's, you know, so many people play F shapes like that, whereas it should, you know, if you talk classically, it's like this.
Yeah.
But most guitarists that I know do it like this, whether they learned it off ukuleles or whether they learned it off other people, I don't know.
What is it about the ukuleles and guitar? I mean, George Harrison's another one, isn't it? He's a uke freak.
Yeah. I just bought one of George Formby's original ukuleles. Apparently, they say it was his favourite one. I don't know. It's not the one which George Harrison had. It's a different one. But it's a beautiful instrument, and it's not been touched, it's not been restored or anything. So all the sort of grease from his fingers is there, and you can see everything's slightly worn away. It's such a well-loved instrument, and it's magic. It has a magic sound, there's no doubt.
I mean, it was slightly getting off the subject. I heard a rumour that he had, for his stage performances, a few different ones because it had the different tunings.
Yeah.
Is that true?
Yeah, definitely, yeah.
So he couldn't tune
different
it, so they're all
tunings,
different tuned up.
Yeah, and if you put a capo on it, it messes with the tuning of it. Yeah. I'm amazed that George Formby kept it in tune at all, because they're all really difficult. You know, and if you're playing under lights and stuff, as he was, you know, live. Yeah. And
he was the most unlikely star, wasn't he?
Totally, yeah. The little cheeky chappie next door, yeah. Amazing player, though.
Huge film star.
Yeah.
Great songs.
Yeah, girls loved him, didn't they?
It was really fun. Probably not one of his most well. My favourite song was "I Tiddly I Tie Island," which I just always thought was very cheeky and great fun.
It's wonderful stuff. It's very English, isn't it?
George Harrison used to go along to the George Formby bashes. Have you ever been to one?
No, I haven't. No, I should.
You'll probably get an invite now.
Yeah, it'd be interesting. Yeah. But I was playing that's how I taught. That's how I was taught guitar.
So you play that, and then suddenly at 14. I'm going to turn the light on. That mind boggles. So how did that come about? You're at school.
I was just friends at school, and it was illegal at my school to play guitar. It was very antisocial, and I don't know quite what the word is actually. It was frowned upon in every respect to play electric guitar. I think acoustic guitar would have been just about all right, but electric guitar, no. It was sort of the instrument of the devil, you know. And we had to hide in the cycle sheds in lunch hours to play, and there's just a few of us used to go and hide around there. And there were a couple of bigger boys who were already into this, and I used to sneak in and watch them play. And a couple of them became the Yardbirds. It was Chris Drazier and Paul Samuel Smith. And
who went on to produce great stuff, Cat Stevens and other people,
Yeah, so there's quite a history of rock guitar from where I come from, but it was all very anti-establishment at the time.
Those cycle sheds should be listed.
Yeah, really. Yeah.
So, do you remember the first gig?
First gig we ever played was actually, it wasn't that band. It was we called ourselves 1984 by that time, and 1984 played the I think it was called the Molesey Boat Club annual dance on the river there near Putney.
What sort of stuff do you play? Was it covers? Was it? Or
Mainly covers, yeah. We played. I mean, this is quite. We'd all been playing quite a while by that time, and I think I played a bit of sort of Shadows stuff. I think, although we'd sort of moved on beyond the Shadows, but by that time, probably strangely enough, we'd moved because everybody thought Tamla Motown was cool, and it was kind of more cool to play their songs than it was to play English songs.
Yeah.
So we would play things like Knock on Wood, Eddie Floyd, and Hold On I'm Coming. You know what I'm talking about.
Yeah,
because it was kind of cool. In a sense, it was more cool because you could do your own interpretation and nobody could tell you it was wrong. Whereas if you were trying to do a hit or whatever,
it had to be like
it would have to be like they
Interesting.
played it. Yeah, but Tamla Motown wasn't really based on guitar, bass, and drums. It was based on a lot of wind instruments and keyboards and stuff, you know. So we were able to do our versions of those kind of things, which was quite nice.
How long did that band last?
It lasted quite a while. We did quite a lot of gigs in 1984. It was always semi-pro. We would make like 20 quid off the gig if we were lucky, and £5 would go to the guy who drove the van, and then £3 would go for petrol.
Yeah.
And you know, somebody would need a string or a drumstick, and so at the end of it, you'd have 3 and 6 each or something, you know. But we did make money.
Yeah.
And these days you don't make money on gigs,
no.
unless you're very lucky.
So what happened after 1984?
What happened to it?
Yeah.
Well, I left school to go to university, and I thought we'd sort of run our course. I didn't want to do that anymore. But I was very keen to try and do something different with our singer at the time. It was called Tim Staffel. So we came up with this idea of playing what we call progressive rock, which would be, let's not do any Tamla stuff, you know, let's do our own things, start writing, and having said that, I think we did do some Tamla Motown actually at the beginning, but it was much more based around what the Cream were doing. By that time, Clapton was there doing his Cream thing, and Jimi Hendrix was there, so we were totally inspired. This was kind of what we wanted to be, really.
Okay.
But we had this vision as well of trying to do this, you know, the heavy, churning, kind of exciting, gut-wrenching rock sound with the heavy guitar, bass and drums, but also to try and build harmonies on top. So the sort of vision of Queen was beginning to be there. And it was very difficult to do in those days because there was almost no such thing as a PA in those days, as you must remember. You know, if you had anything for your singer to sing through, it was a little amp here, which you could twiddle, and 2 WEM columns.
Yeah, that's
WEM columns, right.
4 8-inch speakers.
That's right. So the speakers this size, which sounds pretty crap,
Yeah.
and you cannot put anything else through that PA. It has to be only the singer. So how are we going to put harmonies through it? And because if you put more than one voice through, it would get that horrible
distorts.
distortion noise. Yeah. So somehow we had to find the money to get a big enough PA to make it work, and it was difficult in the beginning, which is why we accepted the deal with Trident later on, because they offered to buy us some gear. So we were able to achieve the sound that we had in our heads. But in those days, it was like try and find friends who could build amplifiers and put speakers together, and try and augment the PA to the point where it can take more than one voice. And sometimes we had more than one PA. We actually tried that, which worked quite well, actually. So you have the singer's voice in one, and you have my voice in another, and Roger's voice in another, and we do 3-part harmonies, and they sounded fairly decent. And then I was sharing a flat with an electronics genius who made us like a 5 million watt amplifier, and didn't work very well actually. But it was that was
but
the
he was a
next
genius.
He was a genius.
Yeah,
he was
absolutely,
a genius, and it was the new solid state technology.
Yeah.
And stuff, but it kept blowing fuses and stuff. Probably because it was 5 million watts. You know. But so we struggled in but we had a fairly clear vision. And Freddie, you're going to ask me where Fred was. Freddie would come along, and he came along and saw Smile. We called ourselves Smile.
Right.
And I've missed out a very important point, which is how we found Roger. I just advertised on a college notice board saying, please apply for position as drummer. must be able to play like Mitch Mitchell, Ginger Baker and somebody else, I forget who. Anyway, I got this call saying, yeah, my mate says he can do exactly that. He can do all that. So do you want to meet him?
Oh, brilliant.
And I met Roger. I met him in the jazz club room in Imperial College, and he set up his kit. Unforgettable moment. I took my guitar along. He had his kit, just the two of us. And he started going, twiddling. And I said, what's he doing? And he said, I'm tuning the drums. I said, oh, I've never seen anybody do that before. You know, because I hadn't. People that I worked with bought a drum, put it there, and hit it.
That's right, yeah.
Really. So I was amazed, and he was doing this little roll thing, which Roger's very good at, you know,
Yeah.
sort of like military drummers do. And it was part of his style. So instead of going buff, he would go and it was a very sort of
unique.
I hadn't heard
style of
anything like it ever in my life. I was quite amazed. And he had this way of making his hi-hat talk in a way.
Yeah.
Where, it's very unique. You know, when he hits the snare drum, normally he'll do something with the hi-hat to go with it. So it makes, again, this very unique kind of sound. And when he really hit. I'd never seen anybody hit things so hard. And he explained it to me afterwards. He said, it's technique, Brian, you know, and said, and what you do is you don't just hit cymbals when you feel like it. Whenever you hit a cymbal, you hit something else as well to give it the percussion. But it was really, to me, it was a marvel. It was something quite magical. And when I put my guitar with that, it just worked. For some reason, immediately, when we played together, it had this amazing sort of thickness and gel to it.
So now all you're really missing is Fred.
Yeah. So we went out and gigged, and
who was singing then?
Tim Staffel.
Oh, Tim
my
was
friend from school, Tim Staffel, who was a great harmonica player, great singer, good writer. He went off
but
to
with
be
the harmonies, with three, the rest of you
Yeah,
did harmonies.
we sang harmonies, yeah. It wasn't all original, though we did start writing original stuff. But we did, for instance, If I Was a Carpenter. You know that
Oh, yeah.
Tim Hardin song? You know,
Yeah.
If I were a carpenter, you were a lady, would you love me anyway? Would you have my baby? You know, very sweet. Well, the way we did it was, if I had a... And it was like big bang shed building stuff, yeah. And so that was our style evolving, you know.
Yeah.
But it had the harmonies, you know, and we would put harmonies into it. And
So Fred just turned up, did he? Just
no, Fred he was a friend of Tim's. He was at Ealing Art School, as it was. It's a university now, but it was Ealing
Thames
Art.
Valley, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Ealing Art School he was at, doing a degree, diploma in graphic design, the two of them. And Fred spent all his time drawing pictures of Jimi Hendrix. And I don't know what Tim spent his time doing, but he was a very creative guy as well. He would do amazing drawings of strange guitarists with hair down to their toes and stuff. They were just obsessed with rock, as I was, you know, obviously. So Fred, we often used to see as a friend who would turn up at the gigs, and he would always hang around afterwards and tell us what we'd done wrong. I mean, he loved it.
He probably did up to the day he died, really, Fred.
Yeah, no, he loved it, and he said, you guys are amazing, you know. He said, I wish I could work with you. And we went, well, you know, we're a band, Fred, you know, we don't need a singer or whatever you do.
And you heard him sing?
No, we hadn't heard him sing. And he said, no, you should have me as a singer. Well, we went, you know, can't happen, really. But he would say, you know, this is great, you do this song great, but, you know, you should present it better. You know, you should be doing this and that, and you should get better lights, and you should get, the sound should be better. You know, he had all these ideas in his head. And then at the end of it all, he would say, and of course you need me to sing. You know? And so obviously it never happened. But then, cutting a long story short, Smile made a record which was a disastrous failure, and we split up.
Probably very collectible now.
It is, yeah. It was called Earth, which Tim wrote, actually. Quite a good record, I think. And it was made in the same studio as David Bowie's Space Oddity, the day before he made his Space Odyssey. Isn't that very odd? Strange coincidence.
That was the day before?
We were in the studio the day before he did Space Oddity, or the day after, I can't remember.
Yeah, well, I was in there the day after then, because I did Space Odyssey with David.
Bloody hell. I didn't know that.
So literally, as you were walking out, I must have been walking in.
Yeah, how amazing.
Well, I'm glad.
Wow. Well, yours was a success, and ours was like, forget it. 5 copies, you know, so we
I only got 9 quid. David collected the royalties.
Oh, I suppose so, yeah. Well,
I didn't mind. It was great to be part of that.
You got
Anyway,
£9?
Yeah, I got £9. It was
I have
great
to
be part
interview
of it.
you one day. I want to hear all this stuff. Can I do that?
Yeah, please. it'd be
I'd love
great.
to do that.
But anyway, I'm more interested in the other one because you did the thing with Smile, and you say it didn't work out as it should have done.
Yeah.
So did Tim leave, and then
Tim left. He got an offer from this group called Humpy Bong, which were kind of big time because they had an appearance on Top of the Pops, and Eric Clapton guested on their record. Colin Peterson was the drummer
wow.
from the Bee Gees.
Yeah, yeah.
So they had all these contacts, they had money, they had connections, they had record deal. So Tim went with them, and
you still not heard Fred sing, or had you heard Fred sing by this time?
have we heard Fred sing? I can't remember. Around that time we heard him sing. He had a group called Wreckage, and Wreckage were a little bit like us in the sense that they were sort of searching for this sort of new sound, you know, and
Yeah.
very experimental, very free. Good guys. And Fred's role in Wreckage was to run around and scream his head off. I mean, really, it was frightening. He was a frightening lead singer. We saw him, and he was so in your face and so loud and so sort of insistent, you know. So we actually, to tell you the truth, didn't really take to it, you know. And we thought, I don't know if this is going to work, you know. But obviously the subject came up, and Fred said, well, let's just go into a room somewhere and try playing together and see what happens, you know. And he said, I want to basically bring your group back to life, but with me, you know, and what I can bring to it. And so we did. We went in, and a friend of Roger's played bass for us. Big guy, Mike Gross. Big amps, big equipment, big sound, huge deafening sound. And we played I was able to book a lecture theatre in Imperial College in Mech-Eng, mechanical engineering. And we went in there and played, and it kind of worked. We went, this kind of does work. And we rehearsed a lot. We sort of came up with a plan at that point. We said, okay, we got the name. I won't even talk to you about the name. We decided we would be Queen.
Yeah.
And we said, we will rehearse. We won't go out and play pubs and clubs like Smile did, because it's obviously a dead end. Nobody really listens to you in these places. What we want to do is we want to play decent places where people listen to us. So we will rehearse, write, routine, try and get some gear together, and when we are ready, we will play for people. Right. It was a real sort of campaign. Let's try and do this properly this time. And the funny thing was, we didn't have any connections, as I said, you know, until we found this guy, Terry Yeadon. So in the meantime, what we did was rehearse for a few months and then play a gig. And the gig would be in a lecture theatre, and we'd invite, say, 100 people, some of our friends, some people from record companies who we hoped would come along and discover us, and they never came, basically. None of the, you know, you get all these promises, yeah, we'll come along and see. They would never turn up. Or if they did turn up, they go, yeah, boys, but, you know, you need more practice and you need more, you know. So nothing ever happened, except this guy, John Anthony, who was already a friend. He came every time and said, look, I really do want to produce you guys, but I don't have any money, don't have any situation, you know, but someday I will produce you. And so he's the guy who eventually got us signed to Trident, which is good and bad, you know. Got us started, but, you know, got us into a bit of a difficult place. The gig that got us signed, I'll tell you, the gig that sort of moved us on most was when we played Epsom Baths. You ever played Epsom Baths?
I've played Scunthorpe bars, but I've never done Epsom bars.
I don't know if it could be as good as Epsom Baths. Well, you can imagine what the sound's like in there.
Yeah.
Right? You play a swimming bath.
Yeah.
And this was our exhibition gig. We got all this money together to get some gear, to rent some gear and put it. And we invited some people down from EMI Publishing. Right. Ronnie Beck. Do you know Ronnie?
Yeah.
Who's a lovely man, came down and we played the gig, and he came back afterwards and we said, what do you think, Ronnie? Because it's obviously echoey. And Ronnie went, boys, I have to tell you, it did sound appalling. I have to tell you, probably more appalling than anything I've ever heard in my life. He said, but I want to sign you. He said, I can see what you are, I can see what you're going to be, and I want to put my money on the table. So I'm going to offer you an advance for a deal with EMI Publishing. We will publish your songs, and we will buy you, from that advance, you'll be able to buy the gear that you need equipment. So that was a crucial step for us.
Wow.
Not only did we have a publishing deal, but we had some cash to go out and buy the equipment we needed so we could sound remotely decent. So it's a big deal for us.
I'm going to have to invite you back again because we haven't really even touched on your phenomenal solo career and all the other things about. I mean, which is fantastic.
Great.
So you have to come back and do that because I know quite a lot about that and the things that have happened.
I can't believe how much you do know. I had no idea you knew about us.
Well, people often ask this, so some of the most enjoyable gigs you did that have not been with Yes or with Straws or other things on your own. And I always cite one particular. I said, there's one particular gig that I did that I will never forget that I loved to bits. And I said, the funny thing was, I actually didn't have very much to do because it was a guitar show. Brian, thank you so much.
Is that it?
That's it, sir.
That was really easy.
Yeah, the hour has gone. Great pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you. Anytime.
That's absolutely brilliant.